Coach Russell and I were together for 17 years, and that was his last particular year at Georgia. A wonderful sense of humor. And
he's probably the funniest person I've ever been around. And he knew how to use humor on the football field in a way to get the most out of people.
He had so many gimmicks, and I still use his gimmicks today that he had, and the ones that he has. The team me, you know, the big team, the little me.
From underdogs to underdogs.
Just one more time.
Would split that head and would bleed, and I always said that players like to see coaches bleed, so.
He'd always had this positive attitude. If you saw him early in the morning, he was probably puffing on a cigar, and he would say, "It's another day in which to excel."
He kind of had a little sly grin on his face, and he said, "Well, I understand we stole a pig."
Well, he came out with the T-shirt, "Tuck Feck." So you just flip the T and the F around.
He's the only one that could tell jokes in a off-color jokes in a mixed crowd and get away with it, and everybody would laugh.
A lot of times he'd say, "Sit down," and then he'd say, "What do you think about this one?" And he would tell me a joke, and he'd always try a joke out on me before he went to speak that night, and wanted to make sure I thought it was funny before he'd tell a joke. And
He'd have been a great chief marketing officer because he could sell you without being a salesman on anything. He was that good at it.
His specialty was motivating. Gosh, he motivated me. I was an offensive player.
He was the greatest motivator in the history of college football. He could motivate anyone.
You know, some guys like some coaches, some don't. I mean, I never knew anybody that didn't love Coach Russell. I mean, nobody.
And the respect we had for him was such that you did not want to let this man down.
With Coach Russell, you didn't want to disappoint him. It wasn't that you were scared of him. You just never wanted Coach Russell to be disappointed with you.
You know, guys were just drawn toward Coach Russell. They were drawn towards Coach Russell.
He was the type of guy that knew if you were doing what you were supposed to do, that you were going to be successful.
He's probably one of the few, very few coaches that a fourth teamer liked as much as the first teamer. And that's unusual because usually if you're not starting, you think it's the coach doesn't like me, or he doesn't recognize what I'm contributing or I'm offering. He just had a way of making you feel that you could do anything you put your mind to it.
So many people have this really unbelievable feeling of what kind of person he was just by the fact that he looked mean, but he wasn't. He was direct, and he was a great communicator, great storyteller.
As a kid growing up, we had a grandmother in Athens, so we always would go to the Georgia game. I would see one, maybe 2 games a year, and Dad would take me by the hedges pregame, and we would watch Erk form tackle with these players in full uniform, and the blood would come down. And I can remember thinking as a 10-year-old, this is the meanest man in the world. As it turns out, he had a heart of gold.
During the recruiting process, he was my recruiter. And as much time he spent watching me play basketball and football during that tenure, he probably could have coached our team.
The biggest thing that stood out with him to me was he loved his players, and he loved the game of football.
He was a great man and a great person also. He was a guy that, he cared about you.
I just like what he stood for. I mean, he loved his players, and he challenged them to play hard, and those guys, they went out and they played hard for Coach Russell. They played tough.
He was like a dad to me, and someone I could always go to.
He never attacked you. Like most coaches, if you mess up, the first thing they'll do is call you, are you stupid, are you dumb, I've told you 3 times. He would always address the action.
He never said a derogatory remark about anyone. Everything he ever did was positive.
If you knew that Coach Russell was satisfied with you, then all was right with the world.
There wasn't a guy on that team that wouldn't do anything for Erk Russell. He was a special guy. We were just fortunate to be around a guy like that.
not a finer human being, in my opinion, ever lived.
I cleaned up my dad's office when he passed, and 21 years ago, there was a letter from Coach Russell that it sent to Dad, and it was a thank you note. So I still miss Erk today.
He was just a great man.
Wow, what a guy.
Erk Russell is there'll never be another, not in my lifetime that I've ever come across, that's anywhere close to him. He was very special.